but that's such a great thing to do as as you're growing up and being outside and having your kids out in the outdoors and not stuck inside on an iPad, you know, and being on an Xbox. I mean, there's a time and place for that, right? And with a world where everything's evolving to be online, like we just talked about in COVID, I think it's great for people to have that balance. But man, you got to get outside. You got to go play.
I love it. So my wife and I do have a rule, and some parents may think I'm being a little harsh, but my kids don't own any sort of video games or PlayStation
Hmm.
or anything like that. We kick them outside as soon as they get home, and they go play with the neighborhood kids and play
Yep.
football, and we're trying to keep them away from a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, that's how I grew up.
yeah.
I was either got to go play and do a sport, or you got to go to work. You choose. Which one do you wanna do? So, I mean, you growing up and eventually what led you to create an outdoor brand, was that something that you kinda, probably followed suit as to how you're parenting your kids, right?
Exactly. That's a good point. And you're exactly right. So yeah, obviously we had a great neighborhood, had a lot of kids that were around, but
Mhm.
one of the things I loved to do was I had a little John boat. We lived on about a 90-acre lake,
Nice, yeah.
and I'd drag the John boat down to the lake. I'd ride the bus home. My
Yeah.
dad started letting me go out in the John boat by myself starting in like the fourth grade. I don't know if I could get away with that now, but I was out there fishing by myself when I was in the fourth grade. And
That's awesome.
um, that's where I taught myself to throw a bait faster and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I can
Yeah.
it's funny, I can totally relate to that 'cause, probably about the same around the same age, I had a little dinghy with a 9.9 engine on it, and that was the toy, it was, "Hey,
Oh,
do you guys."
wait,
Yeah,
yeah.
everyone was like, "Yeah, do you wanna go play, video games?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna go see as how far I can get and how far I can push the limits without killing myself."
Yeah. So I had a trolling motor. I had a little Minn Kota trolling motor and a car battery, and somehow I dragged that thing into a red wagon, pull it down to the boat, so I
Yep,
could motor all over that lake with that little motor.
that's awesome. Now was
Yeah.
this in South Carolina?
Yes. So I grew up in the upstate of South Carolina. And
Mhm,
when you say upstate, we do have the Appalachian Mountains that run through that corner there.
right.
So I grew up bass fishing, grew up trout fishing, and ended up doing spending a little bit of time on the coast. So I learned
Mhm.
how to do some inshore fishing down there and offshore stuff with some of my buddies. And now we live right in the middle part of the state. So I'm about an hour and a half from both sides. So it's the best
Best
of
of
both
both.
worlds, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you spend most of your time now kinda bouncing between the 2, or is it, uh, staying kinda in the middle and then pick and choose what you're gonna do on the weekends?
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. So we live underneath the Lake Murray Dam, and Lake Murray is almost 200 feet deep
Is it
at the
really?
dam, and the water that they let out. Yeah, it's. I think at one point it was one of the top two. I don't remember. There's some stat on it being one of the deeper lakes.
Mhm.
But when they built the dam um, and built this river, or they allowed the Saluda River to flow out from underneath, that water, even in the summertime, rarely gets over like high 50s, even when
Really?
it's 100 degrees outside. So we have a sustainable trout fishery here in Columbia, South Carolina, which a lot of people don't know about.
Mhm.
So I can literally walk out my back door and walk through the woods there, and I'm in the river in like 5 minutes
Oh,
catching
man.
trout, which is pretty neat.
That's a pretty
Yeah.
sweet spot. Now, so do your kids get the same opportunity to go out in the john boat and go fishing down on the lake, or is that not yet?
Yeah, no, we do the same thing. So I have a flats boat that I'll pull down to Charleston or Beaufort, and we'll get out on
Mhm.
the water down there. And my kids, this water is a little dangerous behind my house. It's a little deep and it
Mhm.
flows pretty fast, so they're not quite big enough yet to wade. I've taken them out in the kayak a couple of times because we have a striper run. They come up from the lakes, come all the
Hmm.
way up into the river in the spring and the summer, and they're spawning basically,
Right.
and they'll hang around all summer. And we can catch them all summer. It's pretty fun. So you can catch stripers on the fly too, right behind the house.
That's pretty wild. It's funny because Rhode Island's so so synonymous with striped bass, especially out by Block Island. So the striped bass, I think we spoke about this a little bit last time, was the striped bass being the equivalent to like the redfish in South Carolina almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably fish for them the same way. So when we're fishing inshore for redfish,
Hmm.
it's almost like bass fishing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like bass fishing in the lake. It's very similar. Then you can go out there for the big bull reds out there on the jetties and in the deeper water, which
Hmm.
is where you catch your bigger stripers usually.
Yep.
Same deal. Yeah, it's pretty similar.
Yeah. It's I always find it to be cool, like the differences in talking with guys like you who are into fishing. And, I love fishing. I'm not a huge fisherman, but at the same time, growing up in Rhode Island, you have to do something on the water, right? It's just like a necessity. But the differences in, how the same kind of concept and culture exists around a type of fish. And really it's the same vibe you get depending on where you go, but it's always revolving around like one fish. For like in Hawaii, it's the marlin. In New England and in the Northeast, it's the striped
Right.
bass.
Yeah.
Down
Yeah.
by you, it's the redfish. Like every region of the world has this one species that is just synonymous with their culture. And it's just like this. I don't even know, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I don't know. I get exactly what you're saying. You can move around, and what I find kind of interesting is that in most cases, the tactics and the types of things that you do to catch that type of fish can sometimes translate.
Hmm.
Obviously, if you're going off for marlin, that's a little different. But some of the things you do for, say, smallmouth in upstate New York might be
Hmm.
kind of similar to what we're doing down here for striper on our lake, like landlocked striper
Right.
or something. So I find it interesting when I watch these shows with Carter Andrews and some of these
Yeah.
world
Yep.
class anglers that travel all over the country, and they're doing a lot of the same things. Um, and then sometimes they'll switch up lures and things like that. Like you mentioned Hawaii. One
Hmm.
thing that's unique about Hawaii and marlin fishing is that they troll big lures. They
Massive.
troll the big dogs, massive lures, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then you get over here, and sometimes we're tossing or we're using live, not live bait, but something that we caught,
Mhm.
and a skipjack or whatever the heck they're using out there for catching marlin
Yeah, like
on the East
Ballyhoo or
Coast.
yeah, yep.
Ballyhoo, we call ballyhoo for dolphin, and always ballyhoo for dolphin
Mhm.
on the East Coast, and then yeah, and then you go to the Gulf and they're doing something totally different. They just have
Totally.
different types of bait fish, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but at the
pretty
same
interesting.
time, it's all the same, like, they're all fishing, right? They're all out there, like, there's the
Yeah,
idea of being, like, this outdoorsman and just no matter where you are in the country, whether you're in, the middle of the ocean in Hawaii, which, by the way, when I went out there and I started fishing and doing some pelagics, you don't have to go that far offshore. It's, as soon as you leave the
oh yeah,
harbor, you're already dropping your lures, right? Like you're
yeah,
500 feet out of the breachway and you're in like a 2,000 feet of water. It's mind blowing. Whereas here
yeah,
on the East
amazing.
Coast, it's wild. It's wild. And then, at least here in New England, you got to go, at least 50 miles offshore to go grab a tuna. I mean, oftentimes, sometimes they'll come inshore, often during different parts of the year, but I think that 50-mile mark is a pretty good gauge. But, back to the whole idea of just fishing, and just being out there, being out in the outdoors and being a part of a greater cause and collective, for many different reasons, some conservation, some subsistence, it's that ideology that, although we have to go to our 9 to 5, we have to work, we have to make money and put food on the table, like we can escape and go be out in the outdoors. So I guess for you growing up, I mean, how important was that, not only from a recreation standpoint, but to where it kind of molded you into who you are today?
Yeah, I would say, you know, some people have a form of meditation that kind of quiets their mind and their
Hmm.
soul, and being outdoors is basically that for me.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell, pretty much. I feel most at peace if it's, me and, my kids or my dad or my brother, and we're out there just, whether we're playing golf, whether we're fishing or, you know, shooting doves in the dove field. It's
Hmm.
just being out there. And I think most avid outdoorsmen have that same mantra and feel the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's funny, like I feel as though sometimes that gets lost in translation, a lot. And there was a there's this idea that although you're going, you mentioned dove hunting, right? Or, I mentioned fishing, and you can apply that to whatever outdoor recreation you can do. There's this idea that, it's almost more take than it is give, but it's actually the complete opposite in most cases. It really is the guys on the front line in terms of conservation are the ones that are avid hunters. You can't, I mean,
Absolutely.
you can go talk to any environmental law enforcement agent out there or any park ranger, and I bet you they'll tell you 10 stories about their best catch or best kill, or and it was never about the catch and kill of the animal or the fish. It was about the journey of getting there and about enjoying the outdoors.
Right. And you spoke about conservation, and how we're almost all of us are mainly concerned about that and making sure it's there for the next generation. I mean, that's
Hmm.
the idea behind that. Not only do you want to make sure it's there, the resources are there, that you're harvesting correctly, and that we're looking at these limits hard. Um, I love our DNR guys here in
Hmm.
South Carolina, and I know some people may think differently about their DNR guys in our states,
Yeah.
but I tell you here that they really work with the recreational guys to make sure, through surveying, constant
Hmm.
surveying. Uh, they're asking us questions. Like I got one the other day about our flounder catch,
Hmm.
because we've seen our flounder fishery on the decline over the last 15 years or so,
Interesting.
and through their same program in these different in these different areas of South Carolina, they've discovered their catches are getting smaller, and they're not getting as many flounder.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out if it's commercial or if it's recreational or if it's a combination of both that are putting these fish on the decline. But they're doing a great job with that and trying to get it, you know, get the ship righted before it's too late. And I'll tell you, they did a
Hmm.
great job with the redfish, because at one point we'd almost wiped those out too.
Right.
Now, that's pretty much all you catch in the creeks. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
So they know what they're doing, and they really are, looking out for the betterment of the next generation being able to get out there and do the same thing we're doing.
Right, absolutely, and then giving that opportunity to then educate, right? And these guys are out on the charters, and people
Right.
like you that are creating companies such as Hook and Gaff, you have this opportunity to perpetuate that through your messaging. Like most guys that you're going on a charter with, they could tell you the ins and outs of these flats and currents and winds and tides and just the whole gamut, and there that's just from experience of being out there. I mean, you gotta put
Yeah.
in the reps, you gotta put in the time, and then on top of that, having companies like Hook and Gaff and a variety of other ones that I've had the good fortune to speak with, it's kind of humbling to see guys like you that are taking that next step and taking their passion and moving it into this positive message for conservation, for change, for the future.
Yeah, yeah, and you've kind of hit the nail on the head a couple of times with us. We want to just hammer that point home that
Hmm.
time well spent is being in the outdoors with the people you love, whether that's your kids, your dad, your
Yeah.
friends, and then combining that with being a good steward of the resources out there.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and that's such a good pun
Yeah.
too. Time well spent.
Yeah.
It was a watch company. So, we've spoken a lot about kind of you in the conservation side and like what Hook and Gaff stands for, but you know, you start from loving the outdoors. You went to Clemson University. Am I correct about that? Yeah. And then
That's right. Yeah.
what did you go to Clemson for?
Two things. I was there on a golf scholarship, and I also was an engineering major.
Okay.
So um, I got an industrial engineering degree while playing golf at Clemson,
Oh,
and we
interesting.
ended up winning the national championship in '03, which was my senior year, which was pretty awesome.
That is awesome.
So I played with a lot of guys that are really good. I mean, there's a couple of them that are still out there on tour, and I'm approaching 40 years old this year. So uh, I think I counted the other day that I played with at least, let's see, I think I counted 8 guys that played at least 1 year on the PGA Tour that were on my team.
Really? Wow. That's pretty
Yeah,
wild. So any like
yeah.
big
I
name
was
guys that are notable or
not one.
what's that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not one of those, but uh, let's see. We've got DJ Trahan is still
Mhm.
out there. Jonathan Bird,
Okay.
he's out there. Lucas Glover. Lucas won the U.S. Open back in '09 at
Okay.
Bethpage.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably the most notable. He's a major championship winner.
Yeah, that's kinda interesting that I
And
mean,
then,
being down in South Carolina, golf is I mean, I find I don't know, I could be wrong, but down south, golf seems to be way more prevalent. I mean, I lived in Florida for a little bit up by Jacksonville, right next to TPC Sawgrass, and that was the thing to do, like, when the PGA Tour came
yeah,
to town, it was you're going to the practice runs, you're going to watch, and, growing up as a kid, I was like, "Well, this is weird." I coming from the Northeast, golf was never really even in the picture, So is that a big part of your life
yeah.
growing up then?
Oh man, yeah. We're an hour and a half away from Augusta National, so I think, most dads have a plastic club in their kids' hands when they're like 3 years old if they're born in this area.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a lot of golfers, like you said, and we have an appreciation for the game and the tradition.
Mhm.
And I think you see that when you watch the Masters or even watch Harbor Town compared to like the tournaments in Scottsdale and other
Mhm.
other places, and the way the fans are respectful of the players
Right.
on the course versus being kind of rowdy. Sometimes they get a little rowdy up in at
Yeah.
Bethpage, for example. That was wild. Got a little rowdy up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean,
Just
you got it. There's
just
time
different.
and place. There's
Yeah,
time and
that's
place.
right.
But, it's kinda interesting, like, there's a
Yeah,
lotta I feel like and I'm not really a big golfer, but I guess my form of golf would be going to the skeet shooting range. I'm a member to the local club, and, like, I go at least once a month, that's kinda my version of golf, and in some senses, it's probably relatively similar, but I think there's a lot of carryover from the golfing and creating a business, and the patience and just the consistency and the reps it takes to become good at golf. I compete in the sport of weightlifting, and that is very similar to golf, but I think in any sport, right? It's this idea of patience, consistency, and time, and just showing up, you know. And so I can imagine that was probably a big part of your time at Clemson to then become a national champion. I can imagine.
yeah. I would say that just the game in general teaches you to obviously sometimes you call penalties on yourself.
Hmm.
We all hear that in association with golf. Your ball moves in the middle of the woods when you're moving a leaf. Are you going to call that shot on yourself, or are you
Hmm.
going to just act like nobody saw it? So it's a
Right.
game of integrity and honor. Um, it's a game of patience, and I say that in the most humbling way because you're inevitably going to get a bad break in an 18-hole round.
Hmm.
You may get two or three or four, and you've got to be able to come back from those. If you hang your head and cash it in, then number one, you're not being a good teammate. If you're playing on a team and you got four other guys that are relying on you to post a score, but number two, you just got to have some resilience, right? You've got to
Right.
be, you know, that's life. You're going to catch some bad breaks. You got to pick
Hmm.
yourself up and
Just keep
get back
moving.
after it, right?
Yeah.
And just learn from it. Yeah. Try to figure out what you did wrong and don't do it again.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
Failures is just an opportunity to learn. So when you were kind of starting out and you graduate from Clemson, what did you immediately start Hook and Gaff, or was there a process into getting into what would become the company?
yeah, that's a good question. So, well, this will be a long answer.
Go
I
for it.
used to wear a watch. Yeah, I used to wear a watch when I played golf,
Hmm.
and that was kind of weird back then because not a lot of people wore watches as a 18 to 21-year-old when you're playing golf, but I
Right.
did, and I created a permanent callus in the back of my left hand from where that traditional crown would just stick in the
Yeah.
back of my hand, and in the industry we call that wrist bite. So if the
Hmm.
crown digs in the back of your hand when you're active and you're building that wrist back, we call it wrist bite. So I had a thought as an engineer in college. I was like, how easy would it be to just flip the crown to the other side? It can't be
Hmm.
that difficult. Uh, it turns out it's a little more difficult than just flipping it upside down.
Of course.
I learned that. I learned that the hard way as I did a little research. But I had the idea way back then, and it was just an idea. That's all it was.
Hmm.
And when I got out of school, I went into the insurance business for about 5 years. My wife went into the restaurant business,
Hmm.
and um, we were kind of racing a little bit to see whose career was gonna turn out better. Because I was stationary for the most part. I was building a business there in the upstate,
Yep.
and she was going to have to move. She was going to have to move with her job if she got an opportunity. So she did end up getting an opportunity, and we did move with her job down here to Columbia.
Hmm.
And that's when I started Gaff. I just started a new thing. I helped her for a couple of years in the restaurant, and that's when I was doing my research. I was contacting suppliers,
Hmm.
having prototypes made. That's when I partnered with the co-founder of the business. His name's Gash Clayton.
Hmm.
He's a good buddy of mine from high school and college. He is a trained graphic designer, but a self-taught artist, and he is amazing.
Yeah.
We've posted a couple of his pieces of art on our Instagram page. You might have to scroll way down, but he's amazing. So
I'll have to check
one
it
of the
out.
first
Yeah.
things I did when I knew, yeah, one of the first things I did when I knew I wanted to launch this business was I knew I had to call him. He's the most creative dude I know,
Hmm.
and he came up with our logo overnight, and it is just awesome. It's so eye
Yeah.
catching. Uh, just we get more compliments on that logo, and it was something he just off the cuff created, and pretty talented in that regard.
Yeah.
Um, the other benefit of having him, though, it's always good to partner with somebody who has strengths where you have weaknesses. So
Mhm.
he is super creative, um, and he's also a watch guy. So
Oh,
I'll be
interesting.
quite honest, I'm not a watch guy, which makes me launching a watch company that much more interesting
Yeah.
because I'm not this guy who collected watches, and I wasn't like into watches. I just saw a need.
Right.
I'm more the engineer who saw a problem and just said, "Hey, this is a problem. We need to do something about
Right.
this." So I partner with the guy who's actually the watch guy who can design the watch the way it needs to be designed and look
Hmm.
and do all that. So I come at it from a almost a consumer perspective where I'm like, hey man, when you're shooting, you need this, or these are some functions we might need.
Right.
Let's make a Tide watch. So then we start to research movements that are available, and he'll look at the design and see if it's compatible with flipping the
Hmm.
crown to the other side. We'll get with our watchmaker, and there's a whole process. But
Right.
that's sort of how the company was founded. He and I, back in let's see, 2014 is when we officially started selling watches. So there was probably 1 or 2 years of build up,
Hmm.
doing research and creating prototypes. I actually took the watches and gave them to some dudes in Venice, Louisiana,
Oh,
and I
really?
said, "Yeah, we fished with." I used to go down there like twice a year. I haven't been in a year or two, but I need to get back down there. But one of the guys we fished with, I just gave him the watch, and I said, "I know how much you guys are fishing. Y'all are out here
Hmm.
280 days a year. Just put this thing through the ringer, and let's see what happens. And call me back in a year."
Right.
So I got back in with him, after about 9 months to ask him how it was holding up. And he had a few pieces of feedback on the cosmetic design,
Hmm.
but as far as the durability and functionality of the watch, and it's still looking good, it was great. We
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head with hours of research and prototype testing before that too. But
Right.
the components of the watch make it durable, and then Gash just does such a good job with the aesthetic design, the
Hmm.
classic design of the watch, that this is a watch you can truly wear to work. You can wear it to the boardroom. You can wear it to church or even to a wedding. We've got numerous straps you can
Hmm.
interchange and put on the watch. So you can put a gator strap on a watch and walk into a boardroom meeting,
Hmm.
and then you throw your Navy dive strap on it, and you go, you know, snorkeling and trying to scoop up some lobsters in Key
Right.
West the next weekend. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I was so intrigued by what you guys were doing, because it was a watch, and I, quite frankly, I'm not a watch guy. And for that same reason that you made a watch, because, as someone who's always outdoors, who's an athlete, who's running around doing stuff, I it was just binding up on me, and it was hurting me more than it was helping me, right? And after a while I was like, "Oh man,
yeah.
does anyone really need to know the time anyway?" So I was like, you know, it got to the point where I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to step away from the watch. But after seeing what you guys are creating and how you're going about, you know, distributing the brand and what you guys stand for, man, they're really, really nice watches. But I gotta ask, like, not knowing anything about what goes into a watch other than that it tells time and that you can have some really cool features like I think, what was the feature, the nighttime, was it triflex or
It's Tritium Illumination,
tritium
and it's made
illumination?
by a Swiss. Yeah, yeah. So that is a new feature that we've just been
Mhm.
doing the last 3 years. Um, we saw a little bit of a gap in the market there
Mhm.
because a lot of the European countries are outlawing tritium.
Hmm.
Tritium is radioactive. It's
Oh,
and for that reason they're outlawing it. But it's in a you'd have to eat this stuff for probably 10 years for it to have any
right. It's like
effect. I'm
mercury. Like, you
telling
need a little
you.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like mercury. Exactly. It's exactly the same thing, pretty much, as far as that's concerned. But it's trapped in a little tiny glass vial,
Mhm.
and it's placed on the dial. So we put those on the hour markers in our hands to illuminate the uh, the dial,
Mhm.
and you can see the time. When you're loading the boat or you're climbing in the deer stand. A lot of times you got to know when first light is
Mhm.
if you're hunting, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's been a real game changer with our anglers and our hunters because a lot of the guys that are fishing too, they're usually launching in the dark
Mhm.
if they're in tournaments.
Right.
I fish a few redfish tournaments here, and we're always in the water probably 45 minutes before first light,
Mhm.
and it helps to kind of glance at your watch and know what time it is.
Right. I mean, can you really even start fishing before, after sunrise? I mean,
Yeah,
if you're not starting
right.
before sunrise, are you even really going fishing, right? Um, I remember a buddy of mine,
Yeah, that's right.
I had just kinda connected with him. I'm like, "All right, we're going fishing." He goes, "All right, what time?" I'm like, "Be at the boat by 4:30 in the morning." And, he lives up a little bit further than me, up by the city, so I get there and I'm like 4:45, 4:50, 5 o'clock, and I call him like, "You coming fishing?" He's like, "Oh, man, I didn't even I'm still asleep. Thanks for calling me." I'm like, "All right."
Nice.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but what really
Well,
what goes
there's other
yeah, no, but I
Yeah,
uh,
what
uh
goes with the watch. So the other features that kind of make our watch unique and different.
mhm,
One of the first things Gash and I talked about was, all right, if we're going to be this brand for outdoorsmen,
mhm,
what are the few things that this thing is going to have to be?
right,
It's going to have to be durable. It's going to have to be something they're going to want to wear.
mhm,
And I think there's also that lifestyle element that goes hand in hand with that because so many of the anglers and the golfers they live the lifestyle off the golf course too.
yep,
So if they're going out to eat, you can probably point at that guy and say, "I bet that dude plays golf because
mhm,
he's wearing Peter Millar slacks and a golf shirt that has a Pebble Beach logo on it,
right,
right?"
right,
So we knew that we were going to have to create not only something that was durable, something that was waterproof.
mhm,
Because these guys are going to be getting it wet. They're going to be filleting fish. They're going to be spraying off their hands. They're going to be, spear fishing. We've got a world class spear fisher
that's pretty cool.
who lives in Hawaii actually,
Oh, no way. Do you know what island?
and I think he's on the Big Island.
Oh,
Yeah, I need to look back and see. he and another photographer out there wear our watch, and
Very cool.
gosh, name escapes me for the moment. He's friends with Carter Andrews. That's how I found out about him. But
Okay.
he jumped on the boat and did some fishing with Carter, and just took some pretty awesome photos too. He and his buddy, and and we got in touch with him. But yeah, so those are the elements that we
Mhm.
had to consider with the watch, and we knew that we weren't going to do digital, and that was the other thing that I've
Mm.
touched on briefly. But we think that time well spent with your loved ones is kind of getting outdoors and escaping technology. So
Mhm.
you're away from your phone. You don't want your teenager scrolling through Facebook when you're on the boat trying to catch a fish, or
Right.
you want to spend quality time with that person.
Mhm.
So we didn't know this for a fact, but we kind of figured the Apple Watch would come along and continue to progress until um, people were dialing from the watch, and
Mhm.
it just became another phone.
Right.
And it hasn't quite gotten to that. I don't know that the popularity is quite to that level yet
Mhm.
to do all of those functions. But people use it. A lot of people do wear it, and they wear
Yeah,
it for different things, and you do see them wearing it for fitness too. And there's something to be said for that. I think that's a positive.
for sure.
But we knew that our watches were going to be analog, and they were going to stay analog.
Mhm.
We just like that classic aesthetic. It's kind of a throwback. Um, you could almost call it vintage now
Yeah,
because
right.
almost everything is digital, really.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. So it had to be durable, waterproof, and we wanted that classic aesthetic.
Mhm.
And then the straps. So the straps have to fit that same purpose.
Right.
So we tested probably, oh man, dozens of different straps to see if they would hold up. And most of the rubber straps that you find on the market are not
Mhm.
really rubber. They're actually silicone.
Oh,
And there
interesting.
were a few, yeah, so there were a few issues we had with silicone. Like all the Apple Watch straps, for example, are usually silicone,
Right.
like 99% of them. I can't think of a company that actually makes a rubber strap. But the benefit of the rubber is that it doesn't collect microbial bacteria like those
Mhm.
silicone straps do. They get kind of sticky. They get
Yeah, they get gummed up.
porous.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They get porous over time, and they collect bacteria that if you are running and working out in that watch,
Yeah.
it's gonna get a funky smell after a while, and
Right.
it's just
Well,
the
especially
best
after
way to
ripping fish for hours on end too.
And that's a really good point. If you're
Yeah.
skinning a deer or filleting fish and you have a silicone strap on, we knew we'd get a bunch of calls after about 3 or 4 months. Man, or on the flip side, we could sell a bunch of straps, but that's
That's
not
true.
what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
We wanted to sell a quality product. So we found the only company. Well, there's two, but we found one. They're an Italian company that
Mhm.
makes the best rubber dive straps, and we've been using them ever since
Hmm.
the very beginning. And they come with a dive clasp. You do have to go through the process of sizing it. We've
Mhm.
got an instructional video on our website that kind of shows it, or they can take it to a jeweler. Um, the process is no different than sizing a metal watch bracelet if you get a Rolex.
Okay.
So you typically have to unscrew a link or two to get it the right size. And in this case, you just cut the links out of our
Right.
rubber dive straps. But once you get it sized, man, it is the
Right.
most
Love
comfortable
it.
watch you will ever wear. Uh, it's wonderful for the heat.
Yeah.
These 85, 90-degree summer days. You're sweating in it, filleting fish in it. It's so easy to clean, and then they're easily interchangeable. So you can put,
Mhm.
you know, if you're a big sports fan, you can put I don't know what team you pull for. You can throw that color on there and go to the game. And yeah,
Well, it
for
it
me, it's orange, so I threw the orange strap on there.
yeah, right. Well, for me, it was, the Patriots. I mean, I still love the Patriots, but, I
You
guess
got
I'm kinda rooting for the Bucks now. What's that?
nice, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, Tom Brady goes, you gotta follow, right? Uh,
Well, I would too, man. I mean, he's got to be loved by all you guys, man.
oh my god.
He was the man for a long time.
Yeah, you see
Yeah,
more, Bucks jerseys around now than you do Patriots. It's wild. It's so funny.
yeah,
It's as if the entire Patriots nation I knew more guys watching like, once the Patriots were done with the playoffs, or not even the playoffs, just done with the season, everyone just started watching the Bucks game, and it was, when everyone referred to the game, you thought, oh, the Pats aren't playing. They're like, no, no, we're watching the Bucks game. So there's going to be as many Patriots fans, if not more, watching the Super Bowl than there are going to be Bucks fans. I can guarantee that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been pretty
that's
wild.
cool.
But so you
He put
mentioned,
on a clinic.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly. You mentioned,
yeah,
um, this concept of planned obsolescence, right? And having the a quality product and really diving deep into the brand and the importance of having a lifestyle around the watch. So, what's been kind of the strategy with continuing that, right? Because on our previous conversation that you and I had before hopping on and recording, we talked about just the movement of made in the USA, really trying to figure out, like, buying from smaller companies and creating these brands that resonate with people, right? So, you
yeah.
guys do such a great job resonating with the outdoorsman, but you could have gone in any direction, right? But the importance to you growing up in the outdoors kind of carried over to the watch. So why do you think that is? Why do you think you chose to go in that direction versus just become another golf based watch? I mean, I know you kind of
Yeah,
play in that bucket as
um,
well, but not as much. I mean, Hook and Gaff is very much so a fishing sportsman outdoor
right.
watch.
You're right. And when we do kind of delve into the golf, it's more custom stuff that we've
Mhm.
done for a PGA Tour tournament or
Sure.
some of these pro-ams or member guests. We do some
Mhm.
logo watches. But that's kind of been fun too. I could touch on that a little bit. Um, but yeah, the reason we kind of, I think a lot of watch companies, and let me back up a little bit because when we started 7 years ago, there were only about 8 or 9, maybe 10 or 11 new watch companies that year
Mhm.
in the US. It was really hard to find people who made the parts and kind of figure out how to go about building this business.
Right.
And, I think I mentioned to you earlier that there were a couple of things like, Alibaba. You can jump on that website now and contact any Chinese factory, any factory really anywhere
Right.
in Central America. You can find out who's making shirts for your favorite brand. You can
Mhm.
contact that company and you can get those shirts too. There's no loyalty a lot of times
Right.
to a brand when it comes to these factories. They're just trying to make money too.
Mhm.
So that opened up the floodgates to micro brand watch companies, apparel companies. I mean, you
Yep.
just saw an explosion really over the last like 6 years,
Yeah.
and it just kind of happened right after we got started. Um, but we knew what was going to set us apart was really creating a brand and building a brand that was built to last.
Mm.
If you try to be everything to everybody, I think you have a tough time, making a brand that lasts.
Right.
And you see that a lot of times. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. You got a Hardee's up there. You know the fast food restaurant
Yeah,
Hardee's?
yeah. Well, from living in Florida, I know what Hardee's is. Yeah.
Yeah, they bounce back and forth between what they're trying to do. Like, there were a couple of seasons where they were making like tacos and stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like, what are you trying to do, man? You're a burger joint. You
Right.
had you had the best burgers and hot dogs 20 years ago, and now you don't even know who you are.
Right.
So, same deal. Like, it doesn't matter what product you're trying to sell. You need to figure out your lane and stay in that lane and own that lane, right?
Mhm.
So we've had a couple of people that have tried to steer us the wrong direction. I feel like saying that our watches look great enough to be worn on a bartender in Seattle in a nice bar. I'm
Mm.
like, you're right. That's a true statement. I think our watch would look great on a dude in a bar serving drinks, but
Sure.
that you know, maybe he fishes. Maybe that's why he wears the watch.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It'll look good on a lot of people in a lot of places, but we've got to stay true to the brand and not try to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's been our main,
I think
you know.
that's really well said. And you mentioning the guy in Seattle, wearing your watch in a bar, that's great. If you want to, anyone can buy your watch, right? Anyone can wear it,
Right.
uh, and
Yeah.
quite frankly, go ahead. Buy as many
Yeah.
watches as you
Absolutely.
want. But there's something to be said about sticking to your brand and one that lasts. And I had a recent conversation with a gentleman who is making socks and he's putting fish print. Like, so if you caught a redfish, right, you could actually take a
Yeah.
picture of it and then he'll take that and index it onto a sock. So your same
Huh.
exact catch is on your socks, which is pretty cool. But,
Yeah.
you mentioned, which I thought one of the big takeaways was, the fact that you can look down at your feet and you're bringing along your love of fishing wherever you go, right? And
Right.
then if you're walking into, let's say, some sort of event and they look down at your feet and they see that you're wearing fishing socks, then there's a conversation to be had, right? And I kind of see the same thing with Hook and Gaff, where you can, that's great. If you want to buy a golf centric watch, go buy the golf centric watch. If you want to go buy the sit in a bar and be a Rolex, go buy the Rolex. But if you want to be a sportsman and kind of give off the vibe that, fishing is my thing, then Hook and Gaff is the watch to be, So I think there's a lot
Yeah.
to be said for
That's
just
great.
staying in your line.
Yeah, you made a good point. So we do some custom stuff too. So we'll do a custom logo watch. We've done some stuff for some nonprofits that you're probably familiar with. CCA is one of them. We worked with CCA in about 4 or 5 different states,
Oh, wow.
and we put they call it the twisted fish, the twisted redfish logo on the watch. So you're right. When those dudes walk into a bar, they're sitting down and they're actually wanting somebody to notice their watch so they can talk about fishing, right?
Right.
Same deal with Bertram. So we made watches for Bertram that makes the sport
Really?
fishing boat.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're a really tight family. And Hills Bay skiffs in Florida.
Yeah, I'm familiar
So
with that.
also another. Oh yeah, they make the
Badass.
best flat spoke that's out. Yeah, and so those guys who wear that watch, yeah, absolutely, they're wanting somebody to ask them, a nice watch.
Yeah.
You have a Hills Bay? Why, yes, I do. Let me tell you about it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
there's a funny meme that I'm picturing right now. It's, everyone, if a CrossFitter hasn't said, that I do CrossFit within the first 5 minutes, do they really do CrossFit? It's like this guy holding his breath, kind of like, kind of similar in the sense, right? Have we talked about fishing yet? Right. So, you're mentioning so many great, you know, uh, programs and organizations, and after going on your website and seeing so much community outreach, that seems to be a huge part and importance to Hook and Gaff. Where I saw you working with that the 18-year-old girl who is out doing work with underprivileged kids, and then also respec and doing the conservation for the redfish. So you guys have really done a great job of integrating yourself and creating not only a lifestyle brand, but like we talked about before, is like that giving back, that piece that will then perpetuate and not only make your brand last long, but also the very fact that we can go out fishing, right? I mean,
yeah,
so
yeah.
like, what are some of these organizations that I've been seeing and the ones that we kind of touched upon?
Wow, yeah. Pretty much anybody who is a nonprofit in angling, we have probably worked with in some capacity. So I like to say, Gash and I talk about it all the time. The answer is always yes. It may just not be exactly what they're asking for. So we get approached like a lot of businesses do for money a lot of times, but there's other ways we can work with these groups
Mm,
to help raise money for their cause or bring notoriety to their brand and their
right.
organization. Just like with CCA with the watches, not only were we helping raise money, but we're propagating their brand, you
Yeah.
know, exponentially with the number of people who are wearing that watch and talking about their watch in the CCA. Um, Same thing with Bonefish and Tarpon Trust. We did the same thing with those guys in Florida. They're a great group of guys that are, they've got a battle ahead of them with a lot of the water issues down
Yeah.
there in Florida.
Yep.
And another guy does a great job is the Captains for Clean Water
Yeah.
group
Yeah. I'm
down in
familiar with
Florida,
them. Mhm.
and they work with Bonefish and Tarpon Trust a little bit, from what I understand. But but yeah, so if an organization approaches us about that, we'll try to work with them in some way to bring awareness.
Right.
And usually it involves a watch. It's a Fortunately for us, we make a product that is a great silent auction item, a great giveaway piece. It's a great marketing piece because they're always going to wear it. It's not like a t-shirt that they're going to wear one day and throw it in the dirty clothes. They're actually going to wear it every day. So it goes with them everywhere they go. So yeah, we've worked with a lot of those groups, as well as the businesses, the
Mhm.
boat manufacturers that I talked about. You mentioned Project Respec. So that was a group of our fishing guides down in Charleston. They're called Redfin Charters.
Okay.
The captain's name is, and business owner, his name is Joel Levine. And, and he's awesome. He's a really good dude. We had a really hard freeze one winter. It was probably 3 or 4 winters ago now, where we had 2 or 3 days that were down in the teens. And on our coast, that's very unusual. So
Yeah.
we noticed there were a lot of the shallow water fisheries were pretty hard hit.
Right.
You go out in Georgetown, some areas, and you see thousands of fish floating, redfish and
Wow.
trout. Um, so he kind of got that going with DNR and got the uh, speckled trout population back up and going. Now we're right back where we started. I mean, it's great. The
Mhm.
fishery's good.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge success. You
Yeah.
mentioned Chasten Whitfield. Yeah, she's a um, great. She's a captain now,
Oh,
and
really? That's
she's
awesome.
from Florida in the Tampa. Yeah, yeah, she's from the Tampa area, and she takes um, kids out who usually they have something, a health issue or something like that,
Mhm.
and fishing could be tough for them, and she makes it awesome for them to be able to get on the boat. Maybe they're in a wheelchair, never thought they'd ever get on a boat, and
Right.
she does all that. She's just a phenomenal person.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
someone like that, I mean, just taking that story right there to give someone an opportunity to become a part of, a fishing experience. I mean, for me at least, I can relate to that and say that when I was guiding out in Hawaii and just taking people out on the boat here in New England, there's something to be said about giving someone that opportunity. Just to reel in a fish or just take a ride on a boat. Like it surprises me the amount of people that have never experienced getting out on the ocean or going and
yeah,
exploring a marsh or, heck, even swimming. I was
yeah,
shocked at the amount of people that don't know how to swim and or there's a genuine fear of the ocean. So for someone like her to take someone that is already at a disadvantage just because of, the way they were born and then allow that person to really explore something new. I mean, she's doing something
pretty,
cool. We gotta
yeah,
get in touch. That's awesome.
yeah.
Um,
And then I've got one more I have to mention because
mhm.
he's my boy, uh, Ozzy Martinez out of Florida. So
Okay.
he was the nonprofit that we worked with from day one when we launched the business. And my dad flew helicopters in the Army. Ozzy did two tours in Afghanistan, and he's a combat vet and Marine.
Mhm.
And came back, and I want to say it was his best friend. It was one of the guys he served with. Committed suicide when he got back from PTSD, and then Ozzy himself suffered from PTSD, and so he made it a mission after he covered, and it's still a daily battle, but he made it a mission to take these guys out on the water and
Wow.
just let
Yeah.
these guys know. I think the main feeling associated with that, and I'm speaking just from hearing him talk, is that
Mhm.
you know a lot of these guys feel like they're alone. They're these big, bad, strong dudes who can take out anybody, but
Right.
they feel like they can't talk about that because they wouldn't be viewed as that person anymore, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of guilt associated with people that they've lost over there too. So a lot of that just ties together, and so it's it's therapy at sea, basically, is what it is. So
Yeah.
he'll get a group of maybe 8 to 16 guys, and they may take out several boats. They may have 3 charter captains that'll take
Mhm.
them out. We did a trip off the coast of Charleston a couple years ago in May, and took out, I think it was about 12 guys that
Oh,
were
that's awesome.
combat. And yeah, it's just they talk about what they went through, and they make new friends, and now they have a sounding board.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I've talked to two organizations now. One, Operation Real Heroes. The other one is affiliated with Last Mango and Jimmy Buffett's organization. It's called Freedom Fighter Outdoors, and it was started with by um, Captain Vinny Lasorsa. And they do the same thing, taking veterans out. And after speaking with those two organizations, they both have their different twists on things and how they do it. But at its core, it's just taking guys out fishing, and it's not about the fish, right? It's always about the stories being told, the connections being made, and that's exactly what I'm getting the vibe from Hook and Gaff. It's like it's not
Yeah,
it's not about the watch, right? Like I think we both agree on that. It's about the time well spent, which I think is a
right.
great saying, and it's an awesome pun at the same time.
Well, that's why when he initially wrote me, and we launched our his nonprofit, my business, at the same exact time.
Hmm.
It was a perfect marriage. It was the perfect timing. His message is my message, and vice versa. So it's I love supporting an organization like that.
Yeah.
It's never going to be a huge organization. It's not going to be what's the one I'm trying to think of, Wounded Warriors or anything like that.
Yep. Yep.
Um, there's been some, those are great organizations, but the bigger you get, the more bureaucratic and I wouldn't say waste, but they have to spend money on management and things like that. And not
Right.
all the money goes toward vets, right?
Right.
So that was Ozzy's main thing. He's like, man, I want 100% of the money that flows through this to go right back to vets.
Right.
And I'm like, man, you're my dog. Let's do this. So
Yeah.
we've been supporting him from day one.
That's awesome. How is your collaboration with them? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So he tries to do several trips a year.
Mhm.
And he's even started getting into a couple of golf tournaments.
Oh, cool.
So he's got a son who's getting to the age where he's getting pretty decent at golf, which is fun to watch. And so Ozzy will take him out and they'll play golf. So he hosted a golf tournament in Tampa.
Mhm.
This was about 3 weeks ago. And we try to either give him watches that he can use for raising money at silent auctions for all these different events,
Mhm.
or prizes, or whatever he needs from us, we generally give him. So
Right.
that's really the way we work,
Yeah.
hand in hand. So if he needs anything from us, he's got our full support.
Right. And you also mentioned another guy, earlier was, Carter Anderson, right? Or was it Richardson?
Andrews, Carter
And
Andrews, yeah.
Carter Andrews, and how
Yeah.
influential he's been kinda in the process of creating this lifestyle and ocean-based and really connecting with a lot of the fishermen. Um, what reaching out to guys like that and having them
Yeah.
part of your team, it's funny, like, everyone that I talk to, and you having a partner, some guys, some businesses, it's just a sole prop, right? It's just one guy, or, but at the same time, that one person, despite them being the sole person that's pushing the cart down up the hill, they have a whole team behind them, right?
Oh, yeah. That's
So,
right.
obviously Hook and Gaff has it's you and Dash, but there's a team behind you guys. So, not only Carter, but I can imagine like the whole family gets involved, right? So,
Yeah.
what does the collaboration look like with him? But more importantly, like what does it look like as a whole in terms of from a team perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. So Carter is just an integral, I would say, supporter of the brand. He is a world class angler. He's had a show for I hate to put a number on it because I could be wrong, but it's at least 10 or 12 years. He's had a show that's been on national television,
Oh wow! All
and,
right.
and unlike a lot of these guys who are just kind of fishing in their lane down in Florida, or doing what they know, he knows how to do everything. I mean, the guy is amazing. So he travels all over the world fishing and knows how to do it. Like legitimately knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
When he shows up there, he has studied the fishery. He knows. He's always prepared. He's always overly prepared,
Right.
and it's awesome watching him. He's the definition of rugged angler when you watch him fish, because he'll go into the jungles of Bolivia
Yeah.
after golden dorado, or he'll go off the grid. Gosh, what was the name of that island he went to that they had to go? It was just an awesome episode. But he's not afraid to go off the grid after what he's after.
Yeah. He's not afraid to
And
get dirty.
yeah, exactly. So he's just a really good supporter of the brand, and when he asked to wear the watch, and we were kind of hoping that it would be everything that he was after, because we knew what he did as a lifestyle and where he went and
Right.
the kind of conditions he put it through, and he just raves about the watches, man. So
That's
To
awesome.
have him say good is you couldn't put a better stamp on the brand.
Right.
And then as far as our support goes, the bigger family, the bigger Hook and Gaff family, absolutely, we have support from the spouses, and it's funny, you mentioned that because we do. Well, before COVID, we used to do a lot of trade shows,
Yeah.
and we would have this one in 2 weeks. Typically, it's called the Southeastern Wildlife Expo, and it brings in close to 100,000 people from all over the country to Charleston, South Carolina, where they get to eat fine cuisine. They look at awesome artwork like wildlife artwork,
Mhm.
sculptures, and we have all kinds of outdoor vendors that make different things, and we're usually there. And that's our best show of the year. It's kind of like the Dallas Safari Club show, but on a little bit smaller scale, if you can
Sure.
picture that. Um, and now we're not doing those things, but when we do, our spouses are involved, and everybody back at the shop is involved. So it's all hands on deck for things like that. And we're a small operation too, so I have a guy that is our director of operations. His name's TJ. He's also a former combat vet. He was in Afghanistan.
Oh, very
He's going to school, going back to school, and then we have two watchmakers that assist with all of our sourcing of our parts, pricing, and helping us get everything lined up that we need lined up, and
yeah.
then do assembly. So they're working on some new stuff right now.
Very cool. So you pretty much keep a lot of things in South Carolina as much as you can, in terms of
Yeah,
like day to day and building or assembling of the watches. And so it's very much so a South Carolina brand, watch, family, the whole bit.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There are some things that you can't put together from scratch, like a movement. So you order these from Switzerland, and then when you're doing this sort of thing, it's there's not a ton of moving parts, but you have to be really good at what you're doing. So we've got a third generation watchmaker on staff who's just phenomenal, and he really helps us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, as you continue through, you know, uh, building Hook and Gaff, creating the brand, extending to where you want to go, and then obviously COVID kind of comes into play. And as we're moving forward, where do you kind of see the future of where Hook and Gaff is going? Like what's your goal? And then obviously, you know, the United States kind of has had this hurdle of COVID-19, right? Something that's just been dropped on us. We don't really know how to really react to it. And it's just a matter of, you can either react to it or you can respond to it. So, what's been kind of your approach to responding to it? And then where do you see Hook and Gaff going in the future?
That's a great question. So we made a really key decision. It was so key. This was in March of 2019, and it's just pure dumb luck at the timing. Honestly, I mean that's all I can chalk it up to. But we got feedback from customers. We got feedback from um, we did a lot of customer surveys, probably 1,000 online surveys with our email database. And we were lucky enough to get 1,000 people to respond to that. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
this was important feedback on pricing, brands they like to wear. We just got a lot of good feedback on our brand and pricing, and what they wanted to see in the future. So we realized that to get to where we needed to be price wise for these people to really own one or two Hook and Gaff watches, we also realized, we had 60,000 emails in our database. These are fans of Hook and Gaff,
That's
but yet
incredible.
we'd only sold a couple of thousand watches at that point.
Mm,
So clearly we have 55,000 or 50,000 fans of Hook and Gaff that don't own a watch.
right.
So I'm scratching my head thinking, okay, something's amiss here. There's got to be a price issue. So that was it. In order to get our prices down into the sweet spot where people started pulling the trigger this last year and a half, 2 years, we had to pull out of retail. We were already seeing some challenges with retail even well before COVID.
Mhm.
We had usually one or two, three retailers go out of business every year, and we'd usually get stuck,
Right.
not getting paid. So, and that's unfortunate because the vendors and the retailers that we liked to do business with were the mom and pops of your town.
Right.
It was your main street men's clothier. It was your main street jeweler or your local fly shop that carried some
Mhm.
watches. And unfortunately, those are the brands that Amazon and these,
Yeah.
online businesses are putting out of business. It's just the nature. So we could read the writing on the wall, and we got several good pieces of feedback, but those two things really drove us to go direct to consumer and sell our products directly online and lower the pricing. So we just eliminated dealer margin. So, our watches used to be priced from 575 to over $800
Yep.
because we were having to build in that keystone margin for that retailer. And now we've eliminated that. So they're 300 to 525 and they're much more affordable.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
So now where
so
does
yeah,
the brand kind of, obviously there's that logistics of you gotta sell watches, like you
yeah,
gotta make the money and continue it. But from a brand perspective, do you guys see yourself reaching out to more anglers? Like how are you gonna go about kind of extending, and kind of like what we said about before, making that long lasting brand well into the future?
yeah. I think the other key piece of information we got from those surveys was that our core is still based kind of here in the Carolinas and Georgia, which makes sense. We're from here.
Yeah.
The brand has a really great core following here in the Carolinas, specifically Charleston and branching out on those coastal regions. And then once you get outside of that, we're still shipping watches to Texas and New York and other places every day, but it's just not as prevalent. So when you look at our total sales and which states they're attributable to, we've got a lot of room to grow. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
We're still very much a Carolinas brand, and we haven't even scraped the surface in Texas or these other big markets. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
So if we started spending more money on digital ads and social media ads, Texas specific, it would be a new brand to those guys. Even though we've been around for 7 years, that would be new for them. So that's the growth strategy. That's the room for growth.
Yeah.
We want to draw a line pretty much from Texas all the way up to New York and kind of grow out from the Southeast and just own that space.
Right. Now, I think in any business, right, or in any endeavor, right, whether it be golf, fishing, there's always challenges. There's always that getting over the hump and moments that you want to wave the white flag, and times that you're just like, oh man, I do not want to ship a watch today. So
Yeah.
what are has there been a moment or maybe even a significant time period where you were just like, you know what, you gotta put up or shut up, like this challenge that had to have been overcome?
Yeah, I would say there's probably going to be another one. I mean, there's always going to be challenges, and this year it's going to be COVID. I would say before that, the issues are probably always associated with growth and funding the growth
Hmm.
for businesses like ours. So you have to figure out what your growth strategy is going to be. Are you going to try to seek outside funding and give up equity in your business, or are you going to try to do it in the form of loans? So that's usually the point where you're like, oh man, how are we going to grow this thing? And that
Right.
was probably 2 years ago for us. Yeah. We got to that point and realized, we're going to have to seek some funding somehow. Let's see what we can get from the bank before we start giving away our business.
Hmm.
And luckily Gash and I are on the same page. We're adamantly opposed to giving away equity in our business. It would have to just make so much sense. It's not even funny, but
Right.
we have been self-funding this thing, and now the growth is funding the business at the right pace where we're still growing 30 to 40 or even higher a year, 30 to 40%. Where we're happy with that. We don't have to be a $10 million business in 2 years, and give it all away. I mean, a lot of people will do that because yeah, you can make money that way, but um, I don't know, man. They'd have to show me something for me to do that because I love the brand. I love where it's going. I love that this could be a generational brand where my kids might want to work in this one day or something
Right.
like that. So we'll see what happens, but this is a long-term brand for us.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Vineyard Vines guys,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to talk to one of the dudes up there, and I love their story. I love that they kept the business and kept
Hmm.
the equity among the two of them. and just grew it at the pace that was right for them,
Yeah.
because they're one of the few. They're one of the few who's done that, and I really admire that. So
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's something to be said about keeping it, in the family and having this really genuine and being authentic and, knowing that, like, if this wasn't bootstrapped, it wouldn't have been a thing, you know, and not going around with your hand out and I think there's a time and a place, right? Obviously,
yeah,
when there's a need to grow, you need to grow, but if you have the ability to go ahead and just pull up your bootstraps and go for it, then I think that's the way to go. And then grow organically. And like you said, you've been growing at a rate where the growth is being funded by the business, and at the same time it seems like in a way the brand is kind of doing the same thing. It's you're growing with your customer base and you're not growing for your customer base,
right.
and trying to fill that gap essentially. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's super, it's really cool to hear that, and keeping it within South Carolina and your efforts to do as much as you can with a lot of the other community. Hook and Gaff is just an awesome brand. So,
man.
yeah, no problem. It really is. I mean, from the design to everything, I'm really impressed when I got to stumble upon you, and honored to be able to talk to you about it. So, you know, as we come into port, where can kind of people get to know you, learn more about the company, buy a watch? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, our website's pretty simple. It's just hookandgaff.com.
Mhm.
Spelled out HOOKANDGAFF. Same thing on Instagram and Facebook. We have our photographer, Justin Hodge, runs our Instagram. He's a professional photographer. He travels all the time. He just got back from, gosh, where the heck was he? He went to, um, did you go to Costa Rica? No, he went to Guatemala. He went to Guatemala.
Terrible.
Um,
What a terrible
yeah, no,
job.
right? Yeah, Guatemala. I went out to the Midwest to shoot ducks and geese, and he's just always getting some incredible shots. And he kind of manages that for us. We also have a bunch of other guides that wear the watch that are also professional photographers and take photos and stuff.
Oh,
So you want to see some really cool stuff and kind of get a feel for what we're all about. Our Instagram page is it.
yeah.
It's our guy Justin and our other guys that wear the watch actually living the brand.
Yeah.
And but yeah, we'd love to have anybody check out the website and check out Instagram for photos and see if there's anything there that you guys like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one more question before we go. The name Hook and Gaff, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, if you're an angler, a hook and a gaff, I mean, they're synonymous with one another, right? You kind of you catch a fish, you hook it, and then you get a gaff to get in the boat. Is there any significance
yeah,
in why you chose that name,
that's a really good point.
or does it sound good? Because it
And
sounds great.
I don't Well, yeah, there's two things. Number one, every one word name has been taken and trademarked. So you have to, that's the reason you see these two-word names all the time for these businesses.
Right.
So when we were coming up with that name, I was thinking of two things that were synonymous with each other that would look cool in a logo.
Mhm.
Well, Gash took the hook and the gaff and kind of made a Swiss looking cross out of it because we
I was
use
gonna
Swiss
say, yeah,
movements in our watches.
looks very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of gotten away from marketing, the Swiss movement because, um, quite frankly, a lot of our outdoorsmen just don't care whether it's
Mhm.
Japanese, Swiss, or anything else. Um, and we're kind of a Carolinas based brand. So we do use the best movements in our watches. We use Swiss movements, but that's a great question because I actually haven't had that in a while. That logo, that's what we had in mind when we designed the logo, was kind of that red and white cross looking um, logo or
Yeah.
flag.
Well, it looks great. Yep.
And yeah, and furthermore, he put it on the triangle, so it's the tag and release flag
Yep.
that you'd see, on a sport fisher.
Mhm.
So that was the red triangle. That's where that came from.
I like it. I like it a lot. Well, Michael, man, it was a pleasure being able to pick your brain and talk more about Hook and Gaff. So, just thanks for being on the show. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.